There is an element of now or never for this because Liam has thrown down the gauntlet this year with his Definitely Maybe 30th anniversary tour. It's as close to Oasis as you will get without Noel on stage.
No, see, I can never leave Oasis. I am Oasis, you know what I mean? And I don't think Oasis will ever leave me.
So I was a university student, but I always harboured I always wanted to be a journalist, and really specifically a music journalist. So I did some part-time work for a magazine called Spiral Scratch, and there was the sort of around the Manchester sort of time, so the emergence of the Stone Roses and the Inspiral Carpets. And I was really into those bands, so I arranged an interview with Inspiral Carpets. I saw their sound check. There was a big buzz about them at the time, and we ended up after the sound check going to the pub opposite, which is the Hawley Arms, which obviously became very famous, where Amy Winehouse used to drink. And we were joined by some of the band's crew, one of which I remember was a very funny little guy with a mop top haircut who was relentlessly ridiculing people, including me, cadging drinks off us, and was just really a memorable guy. And that was my first encounter with Noel Gallagher, because he was one of the roadies for Inspiral Carpets. And little did I know that, his band later would be such a big part of my career and brings such joy to millions of fans. I'd heard a bit of them on the radio when Shaker Maker and I think Supersonic came out. And a friend of mine went to see them at the 100 Club, a friend of mine who's also a journalist. We've got similar music tastes. He said to me, "You've got to go and see this band Oasis. I think they're going to be massive. They're like the Beatles and the Sex Pistols entwined. And I think it's right up your street." So they were playing at the Kentish Town Forum, which was just down the road from where I lived. So I booked tickets for that, and me and my wife went along. They were supported by Cast at the time, and actually quite a lot of people left after Cast had finished their set. We were waiting for ages for Oasis to come on, and everyone was quite drunk by that point. I think they came on at about 10:30 or something, and they blew me away. They were absolutely, it was a massive wall of sound. It was so loud, and it felt like it was going to kick off in the crowd, between the band and the crowd. They sort of were so surly on stage, just so aggressive, and were staring people out. It looked like they wanted to fight with the audience, but it was so powerful. It was visceral. And the songs were amazing, and Liam looked great. He was probably only around, I think, 22 or something at that time, 21 maybe. But his vocals were faultless, and the songs just stood out. Songs like Live Forever, Supersonic, Slide Away. I mean, it became really obvious to me that they were going to be massive. I then got a job on The Sun not long after that. And within that space of time, they'd gone from, 1,000 people or whatever at the Forum Kentish Town to Earl's Court, which was the following year in 1995. They sold out 2 nights. George Michael was there. And it just suddenly became a massive juggernaut. And it just seemed to capture a moment in time. I mean, even now, you'll always read an interview with Liam and Noel because you just know it's going to be such great copy. And you just don't get that with Chris Martin or Ed Sheeran and somebody like that. So from a journalist perspective, they were gold dust. They were having fights on ferries going to Holland. They were abused. They'd had no respect for anybody, and they would just abuse journalists and politicians, and I think that there was just something of that moment, that real coming together of football, celebrity, politics. Tony Blair. This is when Tony Blair was obviously starting to emerge with his new Labour project. 1996 Brit Awards was quite a seminal moment because Tony Blair gave an award to David Bowie. Oasis won a shed load of awards and gave praise to Tony Blair, and it was this kind of real coming together of but it became Cool Britannia. Two of Noel's best friends are Paul Weller and Johnny Marr, obviously of the Jam and the Smiths, and they broke up their bands, at quite peak moments, and they've never looked back. And they have a good life. They don't play as big venues as they used to, but they've got enough money to keep them going, and they don't have to be with bandmates who they may have fallen out with. And Liam made no secret that he was going to do the same thing next year with the anniversary of What's the Story Morning Glory, which of course was the juggernaut that sold 22 million copies and counting. So if Liam's going to do it anyway, he's kind of stealing the Oasis brand from Noel, and Noel's starting to lose control of you know of the story. So I think that he felt also, could they do it for the 40th anniversary? Noel's going to be 68 years old on the 40th anniversary of What's the Story Morning Glory. We don't know what health they'll be in then. Liam's had a double hip replacement. Bonehead, has been battling cancer. So I think there is that moment on the casino table where, you have to make the decision to cash in your chips. And I think Noel has felt that, the 30th anniversary would obviously be the right moment to do that. He's seen the success of Blur, who reformed last summer with a couple of gigs at Wembley Stadium, and thinks, well, if I don't do it now, maybe it'll never happen. It will be big. I mean, Nebworth was a different kind of event, and 2.5 million people applied for tickets for that, which was a high percentage of the population. This is different. I mean, what I think, we're uncertain whether there'll be any other dates around the world. So I think you'll see a lot of worldwide demand for tickets. So there'll be people traveling in from all corners of the world, fearing that they might not be able to see them in their own area. With the Stone Roses, it was very interesting because they've got the same promoters, and with the Stone Roses, they kind of dipped their toe initially. We never thought the Stone Roses would reform. They all hated each other, but the moment came where they probably needed the money. But what Stone Roses did is they did domestic dates, and then they did venues like Madison Square Garden, they did the Budokan in Japan, they did Sydney Opera House. And I could see that following a similar formula, as long as they can hold the relationship together. Because one of the reasons Noel walked out of the band was that he couldn't bear to be in his brother's company. Liam's a very funny guy, but I'd imagine it can grate at times. Noel's spoken about that. So I think they'll see how bearable it is during this relatively short period next summer, and then evaluate to them. But of course, the management and the promoters will be wanting to extend it around the world.